Welcome to a surprise episode of The Breakdown in a lot of regards, because when we first started doing our whole series on the Alberta curriculum in conjunction with the Albertans Reject Albertans Reject the Curriculum Draft Facebook group, we initially said that we were going to do 3 episodes. Surprise! We're doing a 4th, and we have a new background, so it's kind of a big day for us. But one of the people who initially reached out to us to have the conversation about the curriculum draft specific to the Albertans Reject the Curriculum Draft Facebook group is a gentleman named Wade Hutchinson. And we wanted to have Wade on in order to kind of wrap everything up that we've talked about over the last couple of weeks in regards to the curriculum draft. So Wade, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's an honor.
Well, I think that probably depends on who you talk to. But so to start with, Wade, before we get into your perspective and your concerns with the curriculum draft, what I'd kind of like to do is get you to share a little bit of your background and a little bit of why do you care about this curriculum problem?
Okay. Well, I'm in my 26th year of teaching. I graduated from the University of Alberta with an elementary generalist degree, BEd. And the focus of my study was in the area of social studies. So in elementary, we had what they call a focus area at the time. So your major was your elementary ed, and your minor was a focus. That was the way they worded it. So I am very interested in politics and extremely interested in history, always have been. So for me, it made sense to go into that strand in elementary. I have, as I said, I've taught for 26 years and a variety of different levels. I've taught grade 1, I've taught grade 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 9. So 2 and 8 have been excluded, but a wide variety of developmental levels and also a wide variety of, how should we say, settings. So I first started teaching shortly after the Klein cuts and the consolidation of school divisions. And it's quite tough to get a job at that time. And so I eventually got a job teaching on a First Nations reserve in Northern Alberta, not very far from Fort Vermilion. It's Tall Cree. There are 2 schools, North and South Tall Cree. And so I taught my first year, I taught grade 8, 7 and 8 combination, sorry, but they were both 7s. And then I taught 5 and 6, and then 4, 5, and 6. And then I moved to some rural areas. I taught in Vermilion and Cold Lake and Lac La Biche and Red Deer. And now I call Edmonton home and have for about the last 17 years. So a wide variety of settings and grade levels. And so I'd like to say that I'm pretty proficient with the subject of social studies. And I've seen a bunch of different personalities and places and citizens and how they approach the curriculum as well. So why did I become involved? Well, first and foremost, I'm actually a dad. And I've got 2 daughters in the education system in Alberta. And so although I am a teacher, but I wear the hat as dad, and I also wear the hat of voter in the electorate. With Alberta, I find myself to be politically engaged and pay very close attention to current events. So it was spring break of last year, and my family was vacationing in a rental in Red Deer. And I was just checking out social media. I heard the curriculum draft was being released. And immediately there was uproar. And I found this group, Albertans Reject the Curriculum Draft. And I put a post on there. And I've been watching current events through yourself, other podcasts, the news, and the media. And I thought, well, the strip mining, that got attention through a sign program. The parks, that got attention through a sign program. And so I simply responded to one of the comments, and I mentioned those 2 causes. And I said, wouldn't that be great if we could be vocal and visual? This government doesn't like protest. They try to push things through, thinking that, and as I say, very Trumponian, push as much legislation through as possible, don't give citizens a chance to respond before they push the next one through. There have been a number of pieces of legislation that have had multiple pieces attached to them that are hidden, and later on we find information. So I posted that. It had, oh my goodness, thousands of likes and hundreds of individuals wanting to buy a sign immediately, even without design. The thought of the sign, no design, no structure at all yet, but yeah, I'll buy a sign. So then I reached out to Pause, and that's the group that's in charge of one of the sign campaigns, and that would be, and then I also reached out to SOS, Support Our Students Alberta, and because it was very clear that I wasn't going to be able to do this on my own. And so I kind of reached out to both Wing Lee with SOS and Pause, and we kind of combined both groups to some, or sorry, we used Pause as a design. And so with the Albertans Reject the Curriculum Draft and SOS, we kind of we built a little combination there. We have individuals from both groups because SOS strongly believes in the right thing for students in Alberta. And so there are members from each group that met and discussed how we could go forward. We built a website, we designed a sign, and in your first podcast, you had an individual from our group who actually designed the sign. So we all went through this process together. We built a sign, and so from that point forward, I started delivering signs, taking orders for signs, helping out with that, and then became a moderator on their page as well, and just helping make sure that it's clean. It's tough not to be political when you talk about a curriculum, because as much as Jason Kenney said he wanted to get rid of the NDP ideological curriculum, this one is very clearly ideological. And so sometimes individuals come on the page and they make statements about a particular political party. We kind of have to weigh that and decide, because this is really highly tied to the UCP. So that is my backstory.
So I guess to sort of start with, I mean, I wanna talk about the sign bit again for sure a little bit later, and where people can get signs, because I think you're bang on the money when we take a look at when the UCP, or it's probably more accurate to just say when Jason Kenney has blinked. It has always been in the face of intense public pressure. So I want to make sure that anybody who wants to be able to get a sign knows how to get a sign. But before we get there, let's kind of go through. I mean, we've talked with teachers, we've talked with curriculum developers. We've had Carla Peck on the show a bunch of times, and she's been very, very clear that the curriculum design is not a design. It's more like a Rorschach painting. But what are your specific? Like, let's go through two lenses. So as a parent, what are your concerns with the curriculum? And then as a professional, as a teacher, what are your concerns with the curriculum? So let's do parent first.
Okay, so as a parent, there's a few things that I'm really concerned about. The first is the masterminds behind the actual curriculum that we see in front of us. Kenney, he's gone on the record many times as being opposed to school systems and curriculums of the day. And it's very clear that if you dig into this curriculum, that it is very archaic and backward. And society doesn't reflect this curriculum. The society that we have today doesn't reflect that. And that's the case actually with a number of the conservative policies, is that they're living in the past and they're trying to move us back in that direction. So as a parent, I want my children to think critically. I want them to take information, and I want them to use essentially I'm going to blend teacher and parent right now. I'm Bloom's taxonomy. Okay. So what I want my children to do, or my neighbor's children, or any child for that matter, but specifically mine, is that first off, we have to have that base level facts. Okay. So we need to understand and remember data. Okay. So first off, we need to be able to remember it. I need to ask them a question and they need to be able to recall. But it's one thing to recall and it's one thing to remember, but it's also another thing to understand it. because as a child grows, their ability to think critically and to understand more grappling topics grows. Their brain grows, and the ability to deal with different topics or more complex ideas grows as well. So to understand. The next thing that I want my children to do is to be able then to not only remember and understand, but also apply that information to new situations. And when I read with my children at night, we look at the 3 R's, remember or recall, and reflect, and then relate to. Okay, so application of that information is so very important. And then going beyond in Bloom's taxonomy is to be able to analyze it and draw connections among a variety of ideas. And I feel that this curriculum doesn't do that. Okay, it doesn't logically build on information. It's just a smattering of facts. Okay, and lastly, to be able to evaluate and take their personal bias and perspective and look through that lens, but also be able to look through the lens of someone else's eyes. And we have a lot of conflict today, particularly in politics, is that my way is the right way. And if you try to say differently, well, then I'm going to insult you and demoralize you. And I think that that's the problem with that this government wants to promote. They want to promote bipartisanship. And lastly, I want my children to be workers, and I want them to be able to create new and original pieces, and I want them to be innovators. So really, I want them to contribute to society. I want them to be difference makers. I want them to be leaders. It's okay to follow, but I want them to be leaders. And if it is simply based on remembering and understanding, and there's no application, analyzation, evaluation, or creation, then they're not innovators. And they're really not going to be able to live a rich life. And they'll simply be drones and cogs in the system, if that makes sense.
I think it does. I mean, that's certainly one of the concerns that we've heard from quite a few people so far is this curriculum does not seem to be designed to create innovators and thinkers. It seems to be designed to create good little poodles. And
exactly.
That has some very significant impacts, not only in regards to quality of life for those people, but even if you don't want to care about the kids, that has some major economic impacts as well. Because if we don't have a workforce that is nimble and creative and industrious, then what we're going to end up seeing is an overall lag in Alberta's economy in a lot of different sectors. And that's really, it flies in the face of everything that Mr. Kenney says that he wants to see happen.
You're creating worker bees, right?
Yeah.
Essentially. The other thing that I want to just allude to is this whole concept of a 21st century learner. So Mr. Kenney has been very critical of curriculums, and I'm going to quote him here, and I have it in front of me. So I need to say this. Okay. So he was interviewed by Rebel Media's Ezra Levant, so a very right-wing media outlet, and Ezra as well. And he was asked why Canadians don't relate or identify with conservative values anymore. And so I'm just going to quote Kenney. He says, this is the first generation to come through the school system where many of them have been hardwired with collectivist ideas, with watching Michael Moore documentaries, with identifying politics from their primary and secondary schools all the way up to university. And it's the kind of cultural challenge for any conservative government and any party on the center right. And he says, we've got to figure out how to break that nut. And then he was also quoted that saying, if he was elected, he was going to stop the NDP's ideological rewrite of the curriculum, and he was going to consult with parents and experts, which we can talk about later because that has not happened, to develop a modern curriculum that focused on essential knowledge and skills of political agendas and failed teaching fads. So he says that he has a vision for Alberta, but really this shotgun approach, it doesn't work. We've been talking as humans, as citizens of Canada and Alberta, what are the skills that employers need? And I go back to my daughters, and like I mentioned, I want them to be leaders. I want them to be innovators. And so actually, interestingly enough, 21st century employers seek out that concept of critical thinking skills and the ability to be able to communicate. That means listen and speak, and active listening. So listen, and at the same time as you're listening, comprehend that information, and then wait, pause, and then proceed and communicate. Creativity, working in collaborative groupings. As a matter of fact, we look at Amazon as an example, and I don't want to promote Amazon, and because there are certainly some labor issues there. And we look at Google. More Google per se, I guess, is that they have a creative workspace. So if you want to work on a couch that day with your laptop, you can. If you want to work at a stand-up desk, you can. If you want to work at a carrel, you can. If you want to work at a table with others, you can. And that concept of being able to be flexible in a workspace, especially today, having been through what we've been through in the last year and some, collaboration is important. We've found ways to collaborate. And lastly, social responsibility and leadership. And those are what 21st century employers want. This curriculum is all about memorization. Like I said, it's at the bottom of Bloom's taxonomy. It's simply just remembering and understanding. So it doesn't take on those realms. There's no concept of production or synthesis or evaluation on a wide variety of subjects. And so therefore, I notice more than ever in social studies, because there's none of that production and synthesis and evaluation, there's absolutely no respect for the diversities of culture within our province. And I want my daughters to be actively anti-racist. I want my daughters to be open-hearted, open-minded, accepting. And that's the only way we're going to make Alberta, the diverse place that it is, a better community and province.
It's interesting that you bring up the social element, because one of the things that has struck me in the conversations that we've had with folks about the new curriculum is because it is so, well, it's terrible, but because it's so memorization based, it seems to me, and I really would appreciate your perspective as an educator, because it seems to me that what it's kind of teaching kids to do is, if you see an iceberg out in the middle of the ocean there, kids are only being taught to look at the top of the iceberg, and they're not being taught to go, oh, where's the rest? And that, to me, ties really, really importantly with a lot of the conversations that we're having as a province and as a country right now. I look at the situation, the ongoing situation with what's sweating in BC. And there are so many Canadians who don't have an inkling of what unceded territories are, or what the difference is between elected and hereditary chiefs are. And these are issues that are driving major fractures through the culture of our country. And one of the frustrations that I've experienced, and I'm a middle-aged white dude, so I can only imagine how First Nations people feel, but one of the frustrations that I've experienced is people listen to statements from politicians where they say, well, the 20 elected band leaders have said that they support the thing. And okay, well, that's the top of the iceberg, but what else is there? And it's the what else is there, and the curiosity that this curriculum really seems to kill. Am I wrong, or?
No, you're 100% correct. There's nothing essentially wrong with the 2007 curriculum. That was written in the Klein era. And, it focuses on the concept of knowledge, skills, and attitudes. And it was fantastic. So I've taught that curriculum for now a better portion of my career. And it is so incredibly well-rounded, well thought out, sourced, and it follows in social studies the model is called Broadening Horizons. And so Broadening Horizons, what it does is it looks at the center and the core of the person first, and then it builds outwards. And this essentially was set up to, how shall I say, Kenney would say hardwire, but it was set up to encompass basic skills and build on them. So like I said, go from the core outwards. So for example, in kindergarten, the focus statement was being together. Okay, so kindergarten students would learn all about themselves. So for example, some of the activities a kindergarten student might do would be in the I am unique situation. So that's one of the subcategories or learner outcomes is I'm unique. So then what they would do is, I've seen this many times in school, is the teacher would get out the roll of paper and the student would lie down on the floor and their peers would trace them and they cut it out, and then they would draw themselves and color the jeans or the skirt and the top, but then they would label things on the brain, right? And talk about personality and values and culture. And so bringing in truly that one is unique. And then the second major outcome is I belong. And so now, not only do you realize that you're unique and you're special, and you've got that fingerprint that makes you special in your home, in your community, in your school, in your province, in your country, but you also have a group to belong to. And that's so foundational. And then in grade 1, you move to a little bit further outside. You look at citizenship and belonging in community. So now, not only unique, not only you belong somewhere, but now in grade 1, the curriculum looks at your home. And so we investigate the home and who's in your home and what makes up your home, both in a, how should I say, a very compact as well as maybe a nuclear setting or extended setting. And then we look at the school, and the students learn about the school and the community that makes their school. And then we broadening out that, and people look at history of Alberta and their family and their family's history and their community's history. And then we broaden out again in grade 2, and we look at the communities, and we look at some special communities in Canada and how dynamic and unique they are. And they look at it from a present perspective, but then they also go to the past. And then nextly, we look at connecting with the world. And in that point, now they're looking at special communities in the world. And interestingly enough, global citizenship brings itself into grade 3. And then grade 4, 5, and 6, which are the areas I'm more comfortable with. Grade 4 is all about Alberta. Its land, its histories, its stories. So we then look at a sense of the land. We look at the physical geography, the geographic regions, not the political regions. And we look at the stories and the histories and the interactions between our people, Indigenous and settler people. Or we look at immigrants that came to Canada and special communities like, Vegreville and Amber Valley, and we look at things like that. And then lastly, we look at celebrations and challenges that have created Alberta. So not only the good stories, but the bad stories. And Mr. Kenney says that we shouldn't be looking at the bad stories because, we're making people feel guilty. And maybe I'm woke, but, history is about learning where you came from. So hopefully you don't repeat it, but also so that you can make it better and apologize and move on. Grade 5. So now we move from history of Alberta and the land in grade 4. And this is where I spent a lot of my teaching in elementary school, was grade 5. And now we're looking at not only just, we've taken a look and for at the physical geography within the province. And now we look at the physical geography within Canada. So we look at the Cordillera region, which is primarily British Columbia and mountain parks. And we move to the prairies or the plains. And from there, the Canadian Shield. And we move all the way to the Atlantic, and we explore the north. And we talk about the resources that are found there and how they're used. And we talk about resource communities and how they're built. And we look at the usage, and we look at trade and so forth and so on, that makes our country a powerful place and a major player in the global economy. And then finally, we talk about the stories of Canada. A couple of years ago, I did a project that was essentially, I tied this all up, and I looked at the curriculum, and then I looked at the textbook, and I realized, wow, okay, so there's 180 pages in the text on this. And then I looked at the outcomes, and well, okay, there's only 30 pages. So I can really focus on what the kids need and get rid of the surplus. And so they had to do an appetizer. So I gave them a bunch of questions that I knew historically were shorter. And so that was their appetizer. And then they had to have 3 items for their main course. So maybe one of them did the famous 5, or one of them looked at the Chinese construction of the railway. Those are big deals. And then we went to a dessert. And by the end, all the students had to come up and present. And we call that like a jigsaw puzzle approach. So everybody got something, and then they taught each other. So there's your upper area of Bloom's taxonomy. And then grade 6 is democracy. And you're learning about municipal government and provincial government, and how the difference between a law and a bylaw and how it happens, and the makeup of the legislature. And then they go into the Haudenosaunee and the ancient Athens populations and their approach to government. And it was interesting the other day. You talked to Andrea Willman, and she did a really good job of looking at one single outcome in the new curriculum draft, and the challenges that would be faced by teachers, and the challenges that would be faced by students, and the challenges, therefore, that would be faced by their parents. Because it's pretty vague, and it's pretty open, and it's pretty abstract, and it's pretty developmentally inappropriate to have a child looking at a foreign nation centuries ago and having them color a map when somebody in grade 2 might not even color inside the lines yet. So really, this draft is on the very basic area, or the zones or the levels of Bloom's taxonomy, is simply just regurgitation. Teacher says this, okay, and then the child sits or stands beside their desk, or sits in their desk and repeats it like a drone. So really, it's a terrible curriculum. And as a matter of fact, when I looked at it, and I looked at the knowledge, skills, and attitudes, and then they have what they call knowledge understandings and skills. I'm going to echo what so many people that have been on this program, like Carla Peck, has said, is that really this government doesn't know the difference between curricular outcomes and curriculum and pedagogy. So curriculum is what I have to teach by law, and pedagogy is the way in which I teach it and I approach it so that my students have an understanding. And this government has no clue what teachers do, and they continually attack teachers, whether it's their pension, and now whether it's criminal record checks, which, by the way, all teachers have to have an Alberta teaching license. So it's just smoke and mirrors. It's gaslighting. But this curriculum that they're proposing is just fact-based. As a matter of fact, when you look at the skills and procedures, I looked at the 2 curriculums, and I compared 2 similar outcomes: the Act of Union that essentially brought Upper Canada and Lower Canada into a unison, like a one Canada. And I looked at the number of values and attitudes, and there were 30 plus values and attitudes, and numerous skills and procedures. And the one skill and procedure that's in the new curriculum says, or the curriculum draft, sorry, draw a diagram to illustrate the idea of responsible government, showing Upper Canada in 1836 and then again in 1849. So it's a prescribed lesson, and there's no dimensions of thinking. There's no historical thinking. There's no geographical thinking. There's no decision-making and problem solving. So really it's quite weak, and it's embarrassing. As a matter of fact, I believe there are other provinces that have used our curriculum and they have pulled out. So it's quite a shambles.
It's interesting that you bring up the way that you kind of juxtapose the current curriculum with the proposed UCP curriculum. I'm curious, is there anywhere in the current curriculum that talks about how to find gravity on a globe, or how to find Regina in Alberta?
Well, Nate, if you look at my coffee mug right here.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. it's my favorite mug.
I got to get one of those.
So yeah, I got this mug, and I was teaching at home during the pandemic, and the family's around the kitchen table. And my daughter, who's now in grade 6, at the time in grade 4, said, "But Dad, I'm confused by your mug." "What do you mean you're confused by my mug?" Isn't Regina the capital city of Saskatchewan?" Well, yes, it is. But on your mug, it tells me to use a map of Alberta and calculate the distance from Regina to Duck Lake. But I wouldn't find that on a map of Alberta. And so we had a chuckle. And yeah, it's my favorite mug. I like to look at it. I like to drink from it. I'd like to smash it.
I think it's pretty telling, though, in regards to the quality of and particularly the social studies curriculum design, because it's been fairly well, I don't know if I can say established, but established that the social studies curriculum was done almost entirely by one person, who we know has some racist leanings, and who has, while he does have a PhD in history, nobody has been able to demonstrate that he has any sort of background in curriculum design. And I think it speaks quite loudly to the quality of the curriculum when your daughter in grade 6 can look at what he produced and go, nah, that's not right.
Yeah.
That's a little telling.
That was an interesting moment that day. And the gentleman you're speaking of, Chris Champion, I actually was in the vehicle driving, and called from the speaker in the vehicle one day to when I found out that Chris Champion was an author, and we don't really know much how much he has authored of this curriculum. But I was driving, and my daughter was going to her track and field team. We're going to go for a practice. And I found this out, and I was incensed. And so she's in the back seat, and Dad says, "Hey, I'm going to make a quick phone call. Just let me chat." So I phoned our amazing Minister of Education, Adriana. I phoned her office, and I was told that Adriana gets a lot of calls, and that she never returns them personally, but possibly somebody on her staff might. And I said, "Well, no, this is a super important issue, because we've got a racist that's writing our social studies curriculum." And when we look at social studies, there's a whole gamut within the social sciences. So we've got geography, and we've got history, we've got political science, we've got economics, we have current events. And so there's a whole group of sub-subjects that make up social studies, hence it being plural, right? And so I phoned, and I said, "Listen, I need to speak to somebody. I don't want to, hey, somebody might call you back." I said, I do need somebody to call me back. I said, "So I'm a member of the electorate in Alberta. I cast my vote on my ballot. And so therefore, actually, Adriana works for me." And I said, and I teach social studies, and I'm very confident and comfortable with the concept of responsible government and representative government. And I said, so I live in Alberta, and I know for a fact that she is essentially working for me. So I want her to call me back. And, "Oh yes, somebody will definitely call you back." That never happened. So I've called a number of times. But the history of Chris Champion is that he was an advisor to our good friend, Mr. Jason Kenney, when Jason Kenney was working in Ottawa. And I believe he worked for Kenney from 2007 to 2015. And then Kenney brought him in as essentially one of the key overseers / writers of the curriculum. So remember, I said earlier in this interview that Jason Kenney said he was going to bring experts into the field. This gentleman doesn't have an education degree. He's never developed a curriculum. There are a lot of ties to the Virginia curriculum within Alberta, and you can look at the Virginia curriculum, and then you can look at the draft, and you can find some outcomes and some statements that are extremely similar. And then I get side noted, and I say, well, there was also the plagiarism on Wikipedia with regards to the Silk Road. So anyways, Chris Champion apparently doesn't really understand the concept of curriculum design and what goes into a curriculum and all the experts that are involved. So anyways, Chris Champion is the chief editor at I guess it would say right of center, or maybe more right than center, publication called the Dorchester Review. And I encourage the viewers of this particular podcast to just look up the Dorchester Review, go onto Twitter and read through the Dorchester Review and look at some of the tweets. This gentleman, specifically the one that incensed me the most, is that he claimed, and he's famous for this, that the inclusion of First Nations perspectives in school lessons is a fad. And so he's at the helm. And so he's actually posts a number of photographs of Indigenous boys and girls in a variety of different settings while they're attending the residential school. And he has pictures of them smiling. And he's, for example, there was a famous one not long after the discovery of the unmarked graves outside of some First Nations former residential schools. And one of them, he's quoted in saying, they were put through hell, and yet here they are having an absolute blast on a play structure. What gives? And he has a number of photos, and he's essentially making light of the residential school system and the atrocities that happened there. And of course, we know if we want to go back in time, we can look at World War II Germany and the internment camps. And we know that the Nazi Party brought the media in, both to photograph and film Jews that were imprisoned at these internment camps. And of course, the order was to obviously put a smile on your face. They might have asked them to play soccer or badminton, and to have a smile on your face and look like you're enjoying it, because it's a whole propaganda program. And Chris Champion is certainly trying to do that as well. And to have a gentleman like this at the helm of a social studies curriculum is absolutely disgusting. And he's gone on to claim that some Indigenous parents actually chose the Indigenous residential school. And as a matter of fact, he says that some of these schools turned students away because they were bursting at the seams. They couldn't take any more. So he's well documented. So rather than going through a bunch of quotes that, you know, off the top of my head or notes, I encourage your viewers to or listeners to take a look at the Dorchester Review. And his name is Chris Champion. Unfortunately, I'm blocked, so I had to create a Twitter account to go find that information again. But I called him out, and I just got blocked. So,
well, I think really when it comes to the Dorchester Review, as much as some people like to represent it as an academic journal, one doesn't need to look much farther than the fact that they regularly post memes. And I read a few academic journals from time to time, and I can't think of a time I've ever seen like Nature use a meme. Maybe I missed an edition, but I think that speaks somewhat to the credibility of Mr. Champion. But even if you want to acknowledge that he has a PhD in history, even if you want to overlook the fact that he has said some very, very racist things and has certainly advanced some very, very racist ideas. Even if you want to do all that, the best role to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the best role to me that he could play in curriculum development would be that of a subject matter expert, because he would be able to, poorly I would wager, speak to historical facts, but that's a totally different beast than how to put those facts together in a way that kids from K through the whole thing are going to be able to synthesize and interpret those facts. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I mean, but the one thing that needs to be mentioned about history and historical facts, or having historical knowledge, or even having a PhD, is whose history is it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the one thing in when I teach grade 7 is we start off unit on perspective, and so we look at it because in grade 7 social studies we're looking at essentially um, the perspectives of the French, the English, the Indigenous, as well as the Americans, the 13 colonists, through basically the entire year. And so it's not just facts. It's all right. So here's what happened, but how does this group see this event, and how does this group see this event? And so he might have some knowledge of history, but it's his history. It's not anybody else's. And this curriculum, one of the key criticisms as well is that First Nations associations in Alberta were not consulted. The Métis Association of Alberta was not consulted, and now the government can say that we did consult them. I guess if it's a simple phone call, but there was not any in-depth conversation to my knowledge. They weren't at the table. We still don't know who is at the table of this curriculum. It's very opaque. This government is deliberately hiding information and not sharing it to try to, or how shall I say, sugarcoating it, or not giving the right answers that your media would get and have to dig for. But yeah, Chris Champion certainly knows his history. It's his history. It's the colonists. It's a colonial history, and it's not a well-rounded history. And the one thing that I'll say about the current curriculum that we're teaching back from 2007 is it has a world of views in it. For example, if I'm teaching grade 7 right now, and I'm going to go basically from first contact, actually pre-contact, because we look at 3 Indigenous groupings and we look at their economic, their social, and their political structures, and we discuss them. And then we look at first contact, and then we go through exploration, colonization, mercantilism. Then we look at the creation of, Eastern Canada, Western Canada, and the Atlantic region, all the way up to Confed. And then we look at the Riel rebellions, and then we look at other aspects after that. We are looking at perspectives throughout the entire curriculum. And I do not believe that I am hardwiring students to be anything other than global citizens that have compassion and understand that history is a series of events. It's just not one. And some of those events are not published. And because some of them are internalized by the people that were there. And for example, the Indigenous people, they're not a written people. They were an oral language people. And so, of course, we don't have their account. We have their stories, and that's where we get their information from. So Chris Champion can look at it from a colonial or a colonist's point of view. But this curriculum that he has personally put together, or he's involved with, does not have that at all. It's so American. It's so, how should I say, ancient, both in topic as well as approach, that it is horrific. But it's ultimately what Jason Kenney wants. And as a matter of fact, there was a FOIP request, I believe, in the month of October, September, and they were able to gather data that was essentially communication and one-on-one meetings or emails between Chris Champion and Jason Kenney, where Adrienne LaGrange wasn't even aware of what was going on in the curriculum. This is Jason and Chris meeting. I don't know if it was the Sky Palace, but they met. But they met for coffee or in Jason's office, and they talked about the curriculum. And you would think that would be Adriana's job, right? Like, okay, so Adriana's in charge of the people that are writing the curriculum and researching the curriculum and putting it together and compiling it and organizing it. And that she gets that from them in a natural chain of events. And then she goes to Jason, or she goes to Jason's assistants and meets and conveys that information when it's done, not during the process. But this was going on during the process, where Chris Champion was having regular meetings with Jason Kenney and updating him on the progress.
And we've certainly seen, like, there's been multiple reports. I saw one just yesterday, I believe it was, where there was a UCP MLA who was quite candid about the fact that they work for Jason Kenney. That's the culture that exists, and certainly within any party system, I can understand why there needs to be a little bit of command and control on the political side of things. But when it comes to who any elected official works for, the fact that we have a government that is largely made up of people who believe that their first allegiance is not to the people of the province or the people who they're supposed to be representing, it's to their political leader. Boy, we've crossed a line somewhere.
Well, yeah, I don't want to get away from the curriculum per se, but I'll give you an example. Obviously, Aloha Gate, right?
Yeah.
Now, to my knowledge, Jason Kenney does not have a deputy premier, to my knowledge. Now, most governments have a deputy prime minister, they have a vice president, they have a deputy premier, they have somebody that's in charge when the leader can't be, or somebody that's working with the leader when they are there. And how should I say, when the leader wants to cast some things off, this is who I cast it off to. So when we look at Aloha Gate, when we look at his absence or his vacation, whether it be to Europe or wherever it was during the fourth wave, there's nobody in charge. So that is simply, in my opinion, it's an autocratic situation. Everybody reports to Jason, and he's got an amazing memory. There's no question about it. And he knows a lot about everything. I mean, he lies a lot too, but he does know. He's got a fantastic memory. It's photographic, but certainly that government works for him, and they do not work for the people. And he doesn't work for the people either. He works for himself. It's self-serving. And is actually, when he first was elected, I kind of thought, so he wants to go to Ottawa again. He's padding his resume. He's going to come to Alberta. He's going to become a premier. And he's going to do some things, and he's going to pad his resume, and then he's going to run for leadership of the CPC. And then we're going to say goodbye to him, right? But the one thing he doesn't understand is that Alberta, although it's primarily oil and gas, there's a lot of industry here, and it doesn't run itself, right? We can have hardship too. It's not the self-steering ship that he thought it was, and he's run into some trouble. And that's where you need people to help you. You need your government. He refuses to let them in. And that's like this curriculum. It's his curriculum. It's very clear the way that he's criticized curriculums of the day, the way he criticized the NDP curriculum, which was not ideological. And I haven't got to that. But I need to be very clear. I know people that work in Alberta education, and the current curriculum, as I mentioned earlier, is knowledge, skills, and attitudes or values. And we were moving, from what I understand, in the curriculums slightly away from a knowledge, skills, and attitudes and more to a conceptual. So there was going to be a grand concept that was going to be all across the subject areas. So you were going to have this concept, or group of concepts per grade. So you'd have this umbrella statement. And then you're going to be able to cross-curricularly teach in K-6. So you could really embed a social studies concept into a science, or into a math, or into a language arts, which I've done because I've taught language arts and social studies in tandem the last number of years. And so while I'm teaching about, right now, for example, my students were learning about the early New France. Okay, so New France and the Catholicism and the intent to convert the Indigenous people to Catholicism. And so we dig a little deeper, but in language arts, they're learning about the hockey sweater. And I mean, it's a fantastic Canadiana piece of literature, but ultimately it's not about a sweater at all. It's about Mr. Eaton being insulted by his mom when she writes to get a new sweater, because she's like, wrap it properly, please, and send back the change. And so he stiffs her, he sends her a Leaf sweater, and the boy has to wear this Leaf sweater. So this is what we're talking about. Like, I'm talking about perspectives. That's what social studies is. It's looking not only through your lens, your eyes, your story, but looking at others. And that's how we get to have, how should I say, a broader, more mature population. That's how we build citizens.
Okay. I want to get back to the sort of the call to action piece. So talking about the what well, there's three questions that I want to ask. I'm going to start with just to sort of to set reiterate is probably the word I should use. The seriousness of the situation and the seriousness of the harm that this curriculum can do. I mean, Dr. Grace did, I think, an exemplary job of highlighting the fact that this curriculum is going to visit real harm on kids, and Andrea did a very, very good job as well of illustrating that this curriculum is going to do real harm to teachers. And so I wanted to ask you, before we get into the big call to action, one of the things that came out of the episode that we did with Andrea was we got a deluge of messages from teachers who, given the current circumstances, so we're talking about, and I want to be clear, I'm not laying this, and I don't think anybody is, at the doorstep of any one specific government. The current state of the education system has happened over a prolonged period of time. But have you had the opportunity to take a look at any of those DMs that we received?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. So I guess the question that I want to ask is, without getting any more personal than you're comfortable getting, are they reflective in your experience of what's going on in the education system?
Yeah. And it's a product of a lot of things. I looked through those DMs. I was saddened. The one where the teacher was looking at the train was devastating. There have been days, and it's not my setting, it's not my school division. It's not even necessarily the province. It's the profession, how much continues to be piled on. It's just another meeting. It's it's just one task after another. And I get a lot of hate when I go on to certain Facebook pages. I have been told on Kenney's page, he didn't mention anything on World Teachers Day. As a matter of fact, I think he glorified a bathroom. I believe there was a bathroom, and they were talking about, in Alberta, this bathroom, I believe it is at a RV store, I think, and it won some award for being an amazing bathroom. So I might have made a comment, and I said, it's World Teacher Day. The least you could do is maybe a backhanded compliment. And I was bombarded. There was comment after comment. Go kill yourself. You're spoilt. Teachers get 2 months off. The list went on. So eventually I just had to ignore it. So I admit I'm a public servant, and I admit that I don't directly contribute to the economy, but over time I do, because the people that I'm teaching, young children, become future, how should I say, employees and contributors. I get a lot of emails from parents and students and thanking me for what I do. It is part of my personality. There's no question. I can't separate my profession from who I am. I live it. I'm a teacher. I'm a parent. I'm an Albertan. I'm a Canadian. So I can't separate that. And so when I read through those DMs, I know people that are having those same emotions, that can't possibly keep up. That I use the quote, I believe it's Bono, running to standstill. And that's how I feel some days, because it just seems like, and it's through no fault of my school division at all. It's just life. We didn't have cell phones before. How did we communicate? Well, we phoned somebody, or we wrote a letter, right? So we are modernizing, and when we modernize, apparently things get easier, and so we can do more. And so as a teacher, I feel overloaded a lot of the time, and I want nothing more than to create a better future for this society. I want citizens that are kind and compassionate and critical thinkers and innovators. And I always tell my students, whenever I got a class photo, I write their names underneath it, because I said, one day I'm going to read about you in the newspaper and you're going to have done something amazing. And I had a fingerprint for 1 year, and you're an amazing human being. So I've read those DMs, and I see it.
I just have to say, I got to challenge you on one thing that you said there. In regards to you not contributing to the economy, that's bullshit. And I say that because not only do you, I assume, eat and drive places, buy things, which is a direct contribution to the economy, but anybody who is willing to argue that teachers don't contribute to the economy clearly has had their head completely inverted up their ass for the last year and a half, because the one thing that even Jason Kenney has been saying is the last thing that we need to do is close schools because of the economic impact. The idea that teachers don't contribute to the economy, not only simply through their buying and spending power, but simply by enabling not only the next generation of workforce to be able to be a productive workforce, but to enable everybody else who's got kids to go out and be a part of the economy. That has to be, that anyone would say that to you has to be one of the most ignorant and myopic things that I think I've heard in recent history. And given the sandbox that I play in, that is really quite saying something. So I'm just going to go ahead and call bullshit on that right now.
Thank you. No, it typically it has to do with a lot of like salary questions, pension. I pay for your pension with my taxes. So my response is, well, I pay taxes too.
Yeah.
And that pretty much stops them. And, I understand that I have buying power. I have a lot less buying power in the last 9 years than I once had. I mean, teachers haven't seen anything in 9. And I get it. We're going through tough times. I understand. But that's also what this government has done, is it has, guy wore an oil and gas hoodie to the Grey Cup a couple of years ago. He has really divided the province. You're either an oil worker or you're not. And, it blew me away. Just another aside, sorry. We had a torrentially cold winter a couple of years ago, and he was talking about the value of oil and gas keeping homes warm right now, and thanks to our oil and gas sector. Well, what about the people that are out clearing the streets, shoveling sidewalks, transporting ill people in ambulances, doing the jobs that we do to make society function smoothly without gaps and lags, right? So yeah, thank you very much for saying that. I appreciate it. And I missed the second half of the question because we've gone for a while.
Yeah, no, it was really just me saying that that's a very dumb argument for anyone to advance.
So now, with regards to the last episode that dropped 10 hours ago, and and the impact on students, our curriculum as it stands right now, I keep going back to 2007, is pretty inclusive, right? It looks at a bunch of different groups through history. Could it be improved? Yeah, it could. And I think it was being. I think that the curriculum that, although Jason says it's the NDP curriculum, and I hate ideologically stating a curriculum, right? Saying NDP, PC, UCP. Unfortunately, I got stuck in that trench, so to speak. But the previous curriculum that he slammed, it wasn't just NDP curriculum. It was a PC curriculum that started. Dave Hancock was involved, right? And so it started off as a progressive conservative, and then the NDP were elected in 15, and they just wanted to tweak it. They just wanted to look at and evaluate. They didn't step up to a podium and announce, yeah, I scrapped that curriculum, like somebody else we know and brags about it. But they were just tweaking, just making it better, just looking at it through their lens with their staff. Anybody that knows anybody that works for Alberta Learning is that when the PC party lost and the NDP took over, there weren't firings at Alberta Learning. The people stayed. And so it wasn't ideological. It was, all right, so here's our conceptual idea. We're going to use this concept and we're going to develop it with outcomes, knowledge, skills, and attitudes so that you can teach this and in a cross-curricular way and it, you know, that it's sequenced just like it is now, right? You just that whole concept of broadening horizons, moving outwards. And so it wasn't going to be changed. Now this new curriculum, there are a lot of students that won't see themselves in it, right? The attack, Bill 8, sorry, I got stuck there, Bill 8. The attack on LGBTQ+, right? So they won't find themselves in this curriculum. Indigenous people, because they were consulted, won't find themselves in this curriculum as much as they could have. Same with the Métis, same with the Francophones, because the Francophones were also shut out. Hence, not one of their school boards is drafting this. So there's a lot of people that won't see themselves in this. And there was othering. There was statements as others, you know, with respect to Christian communities. So I believe it talked about the contribution of others, right? That Alberta is predominantly a Christian province, but others have had something to do with it. And it's the othering that is strictly racist. So it's a whitewashed curriculum. People won't see themselves in it. Students have to go and learn something that doesn't include them. That will have mental health mental health ripples. And so yeah, it's going to hurt kids a lot.
So my last sort of, and I always say last question, and then I have three more, so bear with me. But what do you want people to do? Like, what can people do? One of the questions that I've floated in the past is, you know, certainly we've heard write your MLAs. Certainly we've heard write the premier. Certainly we've heard write the opposition, because including them in those letters and emails gives them ammunition that they can use. I've heard, one of the other ideas that's been floated is, should people be when they're writing to Adriana LaGrange, when they're writing to Jason Kenney, should they be saying things like, if this isn't fixed, I need you to know I will come and door knock for whoever your opponent is in 2023. I will make sure that I do everything in my power, and it's not just going to be social media, Mr. Kenney. It's going to be, I'm going to do the work. Is that what you want to see from people? What do you think people need to do?
So first off, our signs are available. And given that we've got snow in Alberta presently, we've entered winter. Unfortunately, the lawn sign is, how should I say, unless you're diligent and you shovel around your lawn signs, the lawn sign campaign is a little bit of a stall right now, but you could certainly reach out to Albertans Reject Curriculum Draft on Facebook group and just send a private message and we'll get you hooked up. But yeah, I would continue to write my premier, my Minister of Learning, my MLA, and I'm in Edmonton. So we've only got one UCP MLA, Mr. Madhu. So I think he's going to see a lot of pressure in 23 because he's the only UCP. And but yes, I would certainly find a political party, right? We're essentially, unfortunately, a two-party province in Alberta. So we've got the NDP and we've got the UCP and we've got other parties. But I think ultimately you're right, door knocking, campaigning against. This is going to pass. It's sad. It's going to come into play. Adriana LaGrange has said that she's interested in consultation. Once again, what is consultation? You know, that's a pretty big term. Take it as you will. I don't think there is consultation because I believe of the school boards or school divisions that were opted to give robust response. I think there's 6. that chose to, and I don't believe anybody is piloting social studies.
Yeah.
So they're piloting language arts, and from what I understand, it's pretty good. There's some good points to it, and same with math. But I don't believe anybody is piloting social studies, and we're looking at 2% of the province is piloting the whole curriculum. And in the past, we talked about workload earlier a moment ago about Andrea. In the past, what governments have done is they've done what they call a gradual adoption of a curriculum. So you would do grade 1, grade 4, grade 7, and grade 10. And then the next year would be the 2, the 5, the 8, and 11. And it'd be one subject area. This is rather radical to put them all into play. So I think the door knocking, I think the emailing, although you're going to get those canned emails, they're not being read. But Jason Kenney often says he doesn't receive emails. So then when you send it to somebody else, like the education critic, that would be Sarah Hoffman, right? So you send it to Sarah Hoffman, you send it to Rachel Notley, you send it to your MLA, you send it to the Minister of LaGrange, and you also send it to Jason Kenney. You've got a paper trail, and they can't say we didn't receive feedback. We didn't feel that Albertans opposed this particular curriculum. It seemed to be overwhelmingly in favor of this curriculum. We didn't have any opposition, despite this has been a regular discussion in the news. But they're going to say what they're going to say. So I would, like I said, I would just tag the minister, Sarah Hoffman, the opposition minister.
I think it's one of the other ideas that's been floated towards us is, and I think this is fair to say. I mean, you acknowledge that, yeah, it's largely a two-party system, but we do have other political parties, and I think that there is value in if you're somebody who recognizes that the NDP are the second most dominant political party in Alberta, but you have the Liberals are okay too, or the Alberta Party. Please don't include the pro-choice people because they're terrible. But if you give those, if you CC somebody from those political parties in as well, then I think that does a really good job of upsetting the narrative that this is an NDP curriculum. Because if the Liberal Party or the Alberta Party or the Green Party or whoever also say, yeah, no, this thing's broken and it's bad, then that takes away the NDP argument. And I think it's also worth noting, we've had conversations with several people who worked on the draft that was initiated by the PCs, as you pointed out, and none of them have said that there was any conversation in any of the working groups that they were a part of where it was like, well, how can we NDP this thing up? It was evidence-based, it was based on subject matter experts, and there was no conversation about political affiliation or political goals. So it's, I mean, and the last thing that I just want to point out is, here's what you need to do in order to say that you did consultation. So, Wade, what does consultation mean to you? Okay, good talk. Thank you so much for considering that.
Yeah, right.
But I mean, really, that's now I can say that I consulted you. I obviously didn't give a rat's ass about what your answer was, or have any desire to hear it, but I consulted you.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and I feel for those groups, right? They're minority groups, and they deserve a voice. I mean, we all deserve a voice, but to have the door essentially shut out or closed and barred and locked, those people don't have a voice, but they're contributing members of our past, our present, and our future, and they're workers, and they have a special story to tell. And that's essentially what social studies is it's storytelling. When I teach, I storytell. And then I stop and I'm like, okay, so now you continue the story and I want you to be this person. And, I love teaching social studies, and it's so inclusive, and it's our yesterday, it's our today, and it's our future. And if we don't do something, our future's broken. And these kids are vulnerable. They are depending on us to support them. My daughters need me. My students need me. The children of Edmonton need me. The children of Alberta need me. They need you. They need all of us. And this government doesn't do anything for anybody other than itself. And they need us. And is it protests like what happened this summer where people run protests? Yeah, it could be protests. It certainly could. It's a sign campaign. It's an email campaign. It's this. It's touching the media and getting our message out, because there's a lot of complacent Albertans that aren't aware, and there's a lot of people that now Jason's lost a lot of support, but there's a lot of people that believe everything that comes out of his mouth because he repeats it day after day after day, and he thinks, and they must think, because he's fooling himself. His lies are convincing himself of them that he is truthful. Right? That's what a liar does. The more lies you tell, the more your reality is changed, right? Oh, that really did happen. No, it didn't. No, you just said it did. So I think that his continual dialogue in the media and his whether it's the nurses, whether it's the doctors, whether it's the NDP, whether it's this curriculum, his continual rhetoric seems believable to himself. And then if he can convince himself, obviously he can convince Albertans. And I believe it was Angus McBeath who said that this curriculum was going to make, it was going to help Albertans, or it had something to do, alluded to used car salesmen. Like, we're going to create somebody that would be an amazing used car salesman. No, we want more than that. Nothing, no disrespect to used car salespeople, but we need more than that. And this curriculum doesn't give it. And I'm really scared for the future and what we're going to have. We rank internationally, not that I'm for standardized tests, but our school board, the one that I'm in, and Alberta Education, we rank globally. And there are countries, Norway comes to visit us and watch what we do internationally. This is an embarrassment. It's just not an embarrassment of a curriculum, but it's an international embarrassment that it's going to send us back decades. So I want to do this for the kids. It's not about me. It's about the future of Alberta.
I can't think of a better note to leave it on, Wade. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Thank you so much for your commitment to Alberta's kids, not only as a teacher, but through your advocacy. And I mean, as a parent who has kids myself, I hope you and the folks that you've surrounded yourself with keep it up. And I have not had the opportunity to say this since we started to get the DMs, but for you and all the other teachers who are trying to navigate a failing system with an impending failed curriculum about to be foisted on them, man, there are more of us who appreciate what you're doing than the vocal minority who don't have a clue what they're talking about.
Well, I want to thank you for inviting me. Like I said, longtime viewer and fan, and first time interviewee. To be given a platform like this certainly helps springboard this forward. And we just got to keep the momentum going, and ultimately keep the kids in our hearts. Right? Not the kids that are in school now necessarily, but the kids of the future too. This is about them. That's what school is. School is about the kids. It's not about me. It's not about a political agenda. It's about kids, and it's about giving them the skills necessary to be contributing, innovative, and productive members of a society that every generation gets better.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Wade.
Thank you.
As always, if you appreciate the kind of content that we're trying to produce here at The Breakdown, we would love it if you swung by our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/thebreakdownab and signed up for a small monthly sponsorship of the work that we're trying to do here. It is because of the support that we receive from our Patreon sponsors that we're able to continually up our game, and it is tremendously appreciated. So I want to throw a big thank you out to them, and you can go ahead and visit that website and join and support us as well, because we need all the help we can get. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much for listening and being part of these important conversations. And we will see you next time on The Breakdown.